our station.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, concerns about the presence of flock surveillance cameras have become as common as the tracking devices themselves. But a new report finds their reach may go well beyond the roadways. Later in the program, art that explores history, trauma, and the human condition. We meet the painter behind the new exhibition. But first, what began with news reports of police using flock surveillance cameras to spy on their exes has spiraled into something like a national resistance movement. Here to tell us about how those concerns are manifesting at the local level is Elizabeth Caldwell, investigative reporter at Jacksonville Today. Welcome back, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So you had a great report in Jacksonville Today, and I want to talk about it. But like a lot of communities, we've been hearing about flock safety cameras. It's become really a dominant narrative and raising all kinds of concerns about privacy and surveillance, and we'll get into some of that. But what got you into the local stories about the local cameras here?
So I came from Oklahoma, as you know, just recently, and flock cameras actually rolled out there first. So I started learning about flock cameras in 2024 because Tulsa was one of the first cities that had them. And they've rapidly rolled out across the country. It's been really surprising to see how quickly they have managed to. The company says, I think, that they have 122,000 devices across the country. So it's rapidly rolled out across the country. And there's been lots of concerns, obviously, like you said, around police officers abusing them. There's been some leaks. A YouTuber was able to hack into some of the flock footage because the selling point behind flock is that the data is so easily shareable among agencies. And there's just privacy advocates have been flagging the flocks for a really long time.
Yeah. And so you had heard about the presence of a flock camera in kind of an unusual place.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting accustomed to seeing them along the roads, and a lot of the coverage that we've seen, whether it's abuses or use, have centered on its use on the highways, capturing license plates.
Well, yeah, and that's the police emphasize over and over again that they're used for license plates, but when you see a camera at a pool, like the one, I saw it on Reddit. A person posted a picture of a pool at an apartment complex on Reddit and said, oh, this is a flock camera pointed at a pool, which would undercut the law enforcement narrative a bit that it's just for roads, because the selling point, again, with flock is that they can easily share their footage with the police. So, I found a flock camera pointed at a community pool, went out there and confirmed it, and then found a second one at another property owned by the same company.
And so this, is part of a wider adoption beyond what we're seeing just for traditional law enforcement purposes. You've been looking at how they're being adopted by communities, HOAs, condo associations, in this case, apartment complexes. And, that starts to get into the issue of, who's consenting to this, because you can see homeowners associations, perhaps, you've reported they have a board, a condo association has a board. And so there's this, somewhat voluntary compliance that a community is making in that case. They're choosing to put up these cameras. But if you're in an apartment complex, you're not really opting in.
No, you're not. But it's really interesting to know that Flock originally targeted homeowners associations. That was how Flock started, was it marketed itself to homeowners associations. Then it went to the police and said, hey, we have a network of cameras here. So, right. So that was how it started. So there's a network of these privately held cameras that can be accessed. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, yes, except that, when this one that you found is at an apartment complex.
Yeah. Apartment complex, yes, and doesn't have an HOA. So, and it's not that they can't opt in because they have absolutely no say. Yes, just like you were saying. Mm-hmm.
And is there any explanation that you've been able to get about why someone would want, pointed at a pool, for instance?
No, I mean, I can make assumptions like we all could, but no one has explained it to me. I called both the local company, the the physical apartment building and spoke to the managers at both of those apartment complexes. One of them told me that the owner installed it. I don't know, who they think the owner is, but the actual owner of the two apartment complexes is Fundrise. And they didn't return my calls, and Flock didn't return my calls either.
Okay. So this issue of community participation has been, kind of this evolving conversation. And some people will remember this sort of vaguely dystopian ad that ran during the Super Bowl that highlighted a partnership at the time that was between Ring cameras and Flock Safety. And I mean, for those who don't remember it, let's just take a look and then we can talk about it.
Every year, 10 million go missing. And the way we look for them hasn't changed in years. Until now. One post of a dog's photo in the Ring app starts outdoor cameras looking for a match. Search Party from Ring uses AI to help families find lost dogs. Since launch, more than a dog a day has been reunited with their family. Be a hero in your neighborhood with Search Party. Available to everyone for free right now.
So obviously there's this kind of emotional appeal to people with lost dogs. This little girl's reunited with Milo, her golden lab. So it didn't have quite the reaction that the company perhaps expected.
No, that deal fell through. That partnership between Ring and Flock did not go forward.
And that conversation that emerged in the wake of that ad was sort of this sense of just this omnipresence, this, entire community surveillance. You can kind of see in the ad this, bird's eye view of everybody uploading their Ring camera content essentially to, this searchable database or perhaps law enforcement.
Right. And that's the difference between Ring and Flock, is that Ring, you need the police, you need to give access to the police every time, is from what I understand. But Flock is 24/7. When you give access one time, the company, I think, would say annually you have to give access, but then the police can, if you allow the police to have access to your feed, then they have access to that on an ongoing basis, which is different from Ring.
Yeah, because Ring, I mean, if there's, for instance, a neighborhood incident, you can give access for a set period, but it's not like a universal access that police then have going forward.
Yeah, and that's the difference between Ring and Flock. Yeah.
Okay, and so you say that deal went south after that. And I just wanted to touch on, I mean, you talked about reaching out to the apartment complex in question here, Mesa Premier apartment complex, owned by this DC-based company, Fundrise. They own a number of residential properties, but they also have some investments. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so they have an investment fund, and I think the model is you give them money and then they invest in real estate for you and then you see a return. Something interesting that I've been looking into lately is that Fundrise was actually fined by the SEC in 2023 for paying social media influencers to promote their product without disclosing that they were paid, which is against SEC rules. So Fundrise paid social media influencers $8 million to promote their funds that you can invest in without saying that they were being paid. So that's something, I don't know really how that relates to the Flock camera debate, but it is, an interesting point about the company. But yes, you can invest with them in real estate. And one of the funds that they offer holds about $23 million worth of Flock. It's about 3.5% of the fund.
Of Flock stock.
Of Flock stock, yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we are talking to investigative reporter Elizabeth Caldwell about concerns over surveillance creep. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can email comments or questions to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find other ways to connect with us on social. And so in terms of local response here, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office has addressed this a little bit. They have, said they've got about 150 Flock devices in Duval County, and they, a statement that they issued said our goal is to use technology responsible to help keep our community safe while maintaining accountability and trust. They say that these license plate readers can raise questions and concerns. That's why their use is tied to legitimate law enforcement purposes, monitored and audited. If someone misuses the system, we will address it. And I don't know how much is known about that auditing process. I know that agencies around the country have defended their use, saying, look, it's audited and any anomaly would be noticed. But of course, the reports that we've seen about abuses within law enforcement have shown some people, including higher ups like police chiefs in Georgia, um, tapping into these cameras hundreds of times, and evidently that not raising any alarms until some public records were pulled by reporters that revealed these multiple checks.
Yeah, so reporters have been pretty important. The Washington Post did a big report that resulted in 2 officers getting fired, I think, but also civil rights groups and some internal audits. Of course, these internal audits might have been conducted because of a public records requesting. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, journalists have been really important in pulling these audit logs that are kept and identifying that officers are searching for the same person over and over again, and then finding out that it's their partner, ex-partner.
I believe there have been some prosecutions too.
Yes,
So, I mean, all of that is something to watch. But JSO does say, their license plate readers have helped solve 15 murders, 17 kidnappings, 6 forcible sex offenses, nearly 100 shootings, and 172 missing persons cases. And so, there is this balance, obviously, that people are looking to strike between privacy and concerns about constant surveillance, and the fact that they have been used in legitimate ways to find legitimately dangerous people.
Yeah, I think it's the JSO has certainly attributed unprecedented ability to solve crime to these cameras, and even the company itself. I mean, it makes the claim that it's solved 10%. Flock cameras have helped solve 10% of crime reported nationwide. So I think you need to balance the privacy concerns with that ability.
Yeah, we've got some calls I'd like to get to. We've got a call from Suzanne on the South Side. Good morning, Suzanne. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Ann, for taking my call. I just learned yesterday about in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, how one of the council members asked the flock person that was pitching this to them, specifically, does this system build a heat map of everywhere a specific car travels over time? And they answered no. But their police chief went and looked it up and researched it and came back and told the council it absolutely does create a heat map. And a heat map is how they know where you go day after day, and it paints your routine onto a map. So then people can follow your pattern of where you sleep, where you work, where you keep going back and forth, and how often and when.
Wow. And so, Suzanne, that would obviously raise concerns, not just about your habits, but perhaps if you're going to see a lawyer, if you're going to see a certain kind of doctor or a therapist of some kind, that it could really...
Well, and if you have a stalker who's trying to figure out where you go and when to meet you, I mean, we need to know these things and have this discussion and make sure these things cannot happen if we're going in this direction. And the company needs to be honest with all of the cities they're going to about what this technology can do.
Elizabeth, are you finding that that the conversations about, as we mentioned, auditing, and then this denial of the ability to track via sort of a heat map style pattern, that some of the information that we're sort of initially getting is being revised somewhat as we learn more about the capability of this technology?
I think in terms of JSO, no. I mean, they keep saying license plate readers are really valuable. That's the message that we keep getting. And I don't know that I'm not aware of any agency that has said, oh yeah, we can track you, aside from apparently this one, that said, oh yes, we can build a whole picture of your day. We do know we can figure out everywhere you go. I don't think very many agencies are saying that, but that's definitely a concern that I've heard. The criminal defense attorney that I spoke with for the article in St. Petersburg, that was his concern. I mean, of course, a criminal defense attorney would be concerned about that if the police could track his client in his day-to-day, tasks.
I want to take a call from Jeff on the West Side. Good morning, Jeff. Go ahead.
Good morning. Hey, aside from the abuse by authorities. Well, flock cameras are leaky as all get out. You can take, 15, 20 minutes on YouTube and find tons of access points. They also claim that they have a rolling 7-day window where they delete all their videos. Not true. One of the guys that hacked into one of them found videos from the calibration setup in the factory. They're leaky. They're miserably leaky. And so you can be worried about all the abuse from the authorities. That's restrainable. It's the hacking ability, and it's just awful security measures that these cameras have that really concern me.
Thanks, Jeff. Does the fact that this company began, as you say, kind of as a opt-in neighborhood watch type device, as opposed to a security company or a police equipment agency, has that in any way created some porosity? I mean, the ability to hack into these systems more than it would be if it was a different kind of startup?
I mean, I guess you would think if they're really in the platform business, they would be able to avoid those sort of leaks. And as far as leaks, the ones that I know about is that a YouTuber hacked into the company, into some footage and put it on YouTube. The company confirmed that that it was vulnerable and that those were leaks. Yeah, but I'm not sure currently, but apparently that's still a very much a concern of people.
Got a call from Mark in St. Augustine. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Two quick things. Yeah, they've been talking about license plate readers for years and years. How are these different from the flock cameras, or our flock cameras have been in the license plate reading business for years and years? Also, about this part about the flock cameras monitoring the pool, flock doesn't have, I can see from a safety concern that might be a good idea, but they don't have people monitoring that camera at that pool 24 hours, do they? Or do they?
I mean, I guess it's an interesting question. Do we know where that footage is going? I mean, I know that they would say, we're keeping an eye on vandalism, or we're making sure people aren't entering the property illegally, but who's watching?
Well, I'm not sure. It might just be stored, but the thing is that you can search, right? So the police can search a nationwide, people who have opted into the nationwide database, they can search that footage. So you can find things, and it's probably a good point to mention that ICE has been, the Flock says that ICE does not have a direct contract with them, but locally they've found records associated with local police departments searching things for ICE.
Yeah, that ICE has been accessing these records to track down people.
Right. So I think it's the search function that is a concern. And I'm really not sure about who is actively monitoring it. I mean, I guess common sense would tell you that there's not someone there watching millions of hours of footage, but I'm not sure.
And to Mark's first question, I mean, there have been certainly license plate readers in St. Johns County for many, many years, and those are operated by Flock Safety. I want to actually take a listen, because this isn't just a Jacksonville concern. Our colleague Noah Hertz at Jacksonville Today talked to the St. Johns County Sheriff, Rob Hardwick, after a press conference last week where he was talking about school safety and the use of flock cameras. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
If you're not committing, violent crimes and you're not wanted by federal, state, or local government for a crime, then there's nothing to hide. People's information is out there all the time with our social media platforms, with people's Ring doorbell cameras, whether it's a toll booth they've been running those, our license plate readers, forever. But this is no different than 20 years ago. We would ride through parking lots and just type tags on our computers in cars, checking for wants and warrants. It's the same philosophy.
So there's a couple of things I want to ask you about there. I mean, one is just the scale, if you're talking about officers on the street, picking out license plate and running them, as opposed to kind of this whole scale data scrape. But the other is this idea of, if you're not doing anything bad, you don't have anything to worry about. And that's sort of a common argument that you hear, when it comes to any kind of additional steps or surveillance. I think the pushback to that, people who have been advocating or pushing back against these cameras is that, privacy isn't about hiding bad things that you're doing. Privacy is a right that we've, granted constitutionally to people, that you have that right. And that if you are under constant surveillance, then you have lost that right to privacy just inherently. So I'm curious, what you're hearing, like from the lawyer that you spoke to, what you're hearing about kind of those two different concerns.
Well, they're concerned that you can search the database without a warrant, and since you mentioned Noah, I just want to say everyone in the newsroom really helped me put this story together. We had a lot of discussions. So,
Yeah.
but to go back to that, sorry, I forgot the question.
I mean, first of all, just the argument about, if you're not doing anything wrong, this is
Oh,
just sort of
right.
part of, a healthy law enforcement effort.
Right. So it's the trade-off, right? So if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about, and we're solving crimes, this way. And it's a great tool. But the Supreme Court has ruled that, if you want to take into account someone's like Google search history, you need a warrant for that. But currently you don't need a warrant to search a flock database. This is a concern from that attorney that I spoke to. He was saying we're waiting for the Supreme Court to kind of rule on this, because why should you be able to search someone's internet history without a warrant, but you can search a flock database without a warrant? So they want to see these sort of safeguards put in place.
Right, because the idea of a warrantless search, again, would be, an unconstitutional act.
Yes, yeah.
I want to sort of get into the flip side, because there was a recent piece in New York Times Magazine written by Willie Staley that I thought was interesting, or at least provides some alternate context to the sort of privacy concern. So I'm just going to read what he wrote. He said, "There's something faintly absurd about watching a TikTok about taking a buzzsaw to a license plate reader while staring directly into a device with a camera and a microphone and GPS and facial recognition technology and your credit card and your browsing history and your photographs and your entire social graph and nearly every message you've sent to anyone ever, encrypted or otherwise. The paranoia feels almost comically displaced."
I would say so.
I mean, we do every day carry around the ultimate tracking device. And as anybody who's been involved in any litigation, or if they've been criminally charged, will quickly learn, all of that is something that can end up in a courtroom, whether it's your biometric data, whether it's, your search history, all of it.
Well, to the point that we are carrying around tracking devices, I think that the unconventional background of Flock, the ease that it can connect to other cameras, the very rapid rollout, the fact that we can see it and that it's not ours, right? In fact, a lot of the cameras I think are leased, so they're not even owned. So it's not even your device, right? At least you own your own tracking device, right? It's yours. But in this instance, I think that's why there's been more backlash over the Flock.
Yeah, we got an email from Allison. She says Flock can absolutely search more than license plates. Flock has software called People Freeform, where attributes can be searched. From their own website, quote, "Users can type details such as clothing, visible accessories, vehicle type, color, or damage, and review relevant matches across video and license plate reader evidence in one workflow." She continues that Have I Been Flocked's audit log, which is a tracking site, Have I Been Flocked, that their audit log found real searches for person in orange vest or someone on a bicycle. So, I mean, the idea of people using that device outside of law enforcement and just basically to find people they're either curious about or perhaps that they want to know more about is, a different level of concern altogether.
Yeah, it for sure is. I mean, it's a powerful tool, and if it was fallen into the wrong hands, could be disastrous.
Yeah. Got a call from Denise in Mayport. Good morning, Denise. Go ahead.
Hi. With respect to the argument about if you're not doing anything wrong, why worry about being spied on by a flock camera? You can analogize that to police officers who hate to wear body cams. But if they're not doing anything wrong, why would they not want to wear one? And when you rely on statistics to assert that flock cameras solve crimes, whose statistics are those? People need to question that basis or foundation a lot more as an excuse for employing flock cameras. And the last thing is flock cameras are used by the government to get around the constitutional requirements that they can't spy directly on people. So they say they don't. They just buy it from corporate America. So it's not them spying, it's corporate America, and we're just buying the data that's for sale. So I think those are issues that really need to be discussed more thoroughly when you're trying to make this look like a balanced view of the need for flock cameras. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, particularly when it comes to body cams, because I think in most jurisdictions, Elizabeth, those were something that were demanded by the community. You're seeing a similar demand being made right now of ICE, that they all have body cams. as a witness so that citizens can, see what's being done. But of course, it is another form of surveillance that is involuntary. If you're in a conversation with a law enforcement officer, you're not necessarily consenting to have everything that you say recorded, used, however, it could be used.
Right. And it's her call brought up an interesting point. So it's interesting to know, and I learned this through a public records request just recently that Clay County responded to, that the police departments don't have agreements, or at least Clay County doesn't have agreements with HOAs or these private apartment complexes. Who they have agreements with is Flock. And then the agency has an agreement with Flock. Does that make sense?
So like the homeowners association has a deal with Flock, and then Flock is the one that's providing it to law enforcement.
Yes.
And that might be with an unwitting HOA, with an unwitting apartment or condo complex?
No, I think that you're aware that you're sharing it with the police, but you're technically, at least according to this one records request that I did, you're not sharing it directly with the police. You're sharing it with Flock, and they're sharing it to, I guess it might be unwitting, like maybe the HOA, and it would be great if I could talk to someone about it, but maybe the HOA thinks it is going directly to police. Maybe the HOA thinks they do have a agreement with the police, but actually the agreement seems to be with Flock.
And then in terms of her question about, who's providing this information about Flock saying we've solved 10% of the crimes in the country, it is, I think, very
claim.
Nebulous, right?
Yeah.
Like how they're making that determination, what numbers they're crunching. And I don't believe any of the kind of details of that analysis have been made public.
No. I mean, it's an incredible claim, I think. You could maybe see it. The cameras are quite powerful, and, they can connect to each other. But there hasn't been any breakdown of really how that has been the conclusion.
Yeah, I want to take a call from Dragon in Arlington. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. So my big issue is, why aren't the neighborhoods being notified that these are going up? In my neighborhood, I have about 14 within 300 feet of my house because I have an apartment complex near me. I've got a roundabout near me. There's so many of these, and some of them are equipped with the Raven speech tracking that listen for, quote, signs of human distress. They were rolled out only as gunshot locators, but that just seemed to get some resource creep there. Why aren't we being told when they go up? Why are they being installed? And being installed illegally, by the way. These don't have breakaway plates at the bottom. If a car hits those, it's going to kill somebody.
So, I mean, in terms of their, location, we do know that we're showing right now a map that's being crowdsourced to where people can, upload the location using their map app to this website. But, I mean, what about the questions that she's raising of, our consent?
It's a great question. A doctoral researcher that I talked to in Germany told me that Flock does have a history of installing cameras illegally. Like before a city could even consent, they would install cameras. So that would be on brand. The part that she brought up about the installation, it bears out historically. But
that part of it seems not new to me. And I remember even 15 years ago, cities were installing these universal, as you could watch somebody downtown block to block to block. I mean, it was used here in some, I think the death of a homeless person here several years ago where the state attorney's office was able to track blocked. And that was sort of pre-Flock. I mean, I think that was something that were just cameras installed by law enforcement or the city, or it was a private entity, though, of course, that was selling it to them.
I mean, they've been around for a long time, but lack of consent, I think it's a problem that I hear over and over again, because you say, tenants' rights, but it's like, well, a lot of us didn't have a say. The cameras out on the public roadways, I don't know that we had a say over those. You might know more about that.
Over whether we had consent over the roadway cameras?
Yes.
I mean, I think that those were pretty much driven by a law enforcement deal, so I think that they've used them as a tool. And obviously, we're seeing here some footage of protests in St. Johns County where they're, there's been a lot of vandalism of flock cameras, but this particular protest, they're just sort of holding up signs in front of the cameras to obstruct their view as a way of registering their dissatisfaction with their presence. Yeah. We've got a call from Madison on the west side. Good morning, Madison. Go ahead.
Good morning. So I just wanted to chime in about the consent issue. For reference, I used to help spec out and install these cameras, not specific to Flock, but other ALPR cameras for one of our local government entities. I no longer do that, thankfully. I am a very big opponent of these cameras because when you see the back end, you can see what these things do, and they don't just take your video recordings and put them in a database. They tag them and make them easily searchable. And we've seen those repeated abuses by law enforcement officers. And we also see, like y'all said, agencies putting them up behind people's backs. I can give you a great example. The town of Orange Park, just a little bit south, our neighbors in Clay County, put up a contract for town council to vote on to approve flock cameras. Town council voted that down after a bunch of people came out and said they didn't want it. And then they went behind residents' backs to go to the Clay County Sheriff's Office to have them put their cameras in the town of Orange Park anyway. So there are ways that they're getting around the consent issue. And when you have a body camera on, that consent is kind of implied.
Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, it certainly does, I guess, make public concern or public comment sort of irrelevant if the agency is going to be tasked with doing it regardless of whether people, agree publicly or not.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you were, a police agency, you could see a police agency or a landlord. I mean, these cameras would be helpful for you. And the company has been proven to be quite aggressive. So that's what you're looking at.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly anecdotally, there are all kinds of stories that stand out in terms of how they have helped law enforcement. I mean, I remember a few years ago, a hit and run that killed 2 cyclists in northern St. Johns County that was only solved because they were able to track the license plate of the perpetrator. And he's now in prison, for fleeing the scene of this fatal double vehicular homicide.
Well, they're still helping law enforcement too, and trying to help them be transparent. Although we don't know how truthful these transparency portals are. I don't know if you've heard about them.
Yeah, tell us about those, because you were saying, I think in your piece, that JSO does not have a portal, but what is a transparency portal like?
Well, it's really interesting. So you can look for Jacksonville, Arkansas. You can search that right now.
And what does it look like when you're searching?
It's some of them are hard to find, but you just Google Jacksonville, Arkansas transparency portal, and it'll pop up. And I believe it's on the Flock website. That's why I said Flock is trying to help. I think this is, I don't know, but it's Flock branded. The
and
website that you look at is
for?
Flock
Are you
branded.
Searching for who's been using it for searching?
Yeah. So interestingly, it'll show how many cameras there are, and then it'll say how many of those cameras are license plate readers, which is a debate that we're seeing over and over again, because law enforcement keeps saying these are license plate readers, but people are coming to understand that they're cameras, and so it'll show you that breakdown. It'll show you other breakdowns, but then it'll also show you who they're sharing data with and who they're getting data from. Interestingly, it doesn't include private cameras because, like I said, that information, as far as I know at this point, is shared with Flock. So if it says they're sharing data with Flock, you're not sure all the data that they're getting from Flock, where that data is from. But it shows the public agencies that are getting and receiving data. But JSO does not have that portal.
Just very briefly, Zuri, I want to take Zuri and Murray Hill. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Zuri. Just for some background, I actually used to be a journalist covering civil liberties abuses, namely Fourth Amendment violations. I wanted to voice a concern and then just ask you to speak to it. My concern is the unwillingness to cut some of the JSO budget in any way when it comes to the surveillance technology. Just as an example, last year, many constituents begged City Council not to approve more money for JSO to get those fingerprint scanners, which they can now use to harass anyone they suspect of being an immigrant, which is just a brown person. They can use those fingerprint scanners to try to verify their status. Could you speak to the disconnect between the repeated citizen concerns over funding for this invasive technology versus the repeated decision from the city to keep on funding this technology, since JSO is essentially in charge of where the flock cameras go.
All right. I'm going to ask you just to sort of briefly touch on that, because we are going to have to wrap this shortly.
Right. So the continued funding, I think that, the police are an important agency. And if they say they need a tool, I think that, leaders are going to listen to that. Right. So I think that that's probably the narrative.
All right. Well, it's a fascinating subject and a very great read. Elizabeth Caldwell's story. There's a link on our website, but of course you can find it at jackstoday.org. Elizabeth Caldwell, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we sit down with an artist who hopes to heal what he calls the damaged skin of humanity. Welcome back. Large-scale paintings that explore even larger themes are the backbone of a new exhibition at the Alexander Brest Gallery on the campus of Jacksonville University. Here to tell us about the inspiration behind the Silence.Silent exhibit is artist Paul F. Yunt. Paul, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Anne, for having me here.
Very glad to have you. So the name of this exhibit is Silence.Silent, and a lot of the recent pieces that you've done seem to echo these themes of, repression, book banning. As a Florida artist, I just wonder, how much inspiration do you take from the current political moment?
Oh, a huge amount of inspiration. Being queer and having our governor with the "Don't Say Gay" motto was in one painting that I exhibited. But in this exhibition, Silence.Silent, it has a duality, which a lot of my ideas, a lot of the concepts go back and forth with a paradox. To be silent is very good. It's healing. It's a wonderful process. But if you stay silent, then there's nothing that is going to be conquered. That is nothing that is going to happen in our society. So there's always the back and forth, internal, external, the opposites at play that are a conflict. And what is going on now in the United States and the world is atrocious, is horrific, and just people allowing this behavior of humanity and treating one another in these respects, I find appalling. And I think that myself, being very sensitive to all these bad behavioral traits, and they're very good also, but I concentrate on those aspects, that I have a responsibility to show it in my art and to open a dialogue. I'm not going to change the world, but I'm going to create a communication with my paintings in the audiovisual installation.
And so your pieces, as we described, they're kind of these very large scale oil paintings. You often use a triptych, like 3 panels, to tell different parts of a story or an evolution. What is it? I mean, how does that merge with just your storytelling style as an artist to kind of take that approach with the sort of 3 panel visual?
Well, the triptych, the symbolism and the concept would be the same approach as reading a novel or watching a film. You have the beginning and then the middle, which is the pinnacle where the characters and the subjects come to a time where there has to be a resolution, and then we go to the end. So symbolically, that is what it is in literature and cinema. And also historically, the religious paintings have triptychs, so it goes back historically in art history, and beginning, middle, and end, birth, life, and death. So it's a revolution that continues, and that's the symbolism, the importance of the triptych.
And people who are watching our live stream will be able to see your, just really electric color work and the sort of intensity of your imagery. You explore some really dark and some really violent themes in your work. It's sometimes kind of through a religious lens, sometimes through a historical lens. But what do your paintings offer in the way of hope or redemption, or is your worldview just very, very dark in terms of our future?
I do see the darkness, but isn't there light? Isn't there beauty? Isn't there a flicker of hope or love? So will that happen in this time? And there are questions. It's a mystery. That's what I propose. So yes, I hope that we can remove all of these atrocities, but I don't think it's happening. I don't think it's going that way. Your first segment, speaking about cameras and looking and watching and the Orwellian concept of Big Brother, that is shown in two of the paintings. But to move forward, and I coined it my Yantian world, that I want humanity to go somewhere else and really not have this false sense of accepting one another when we're just at each other's throats. But we should be able to, maybe it's a fantasy of mine, maybe it will never happen, but maybe we can make it happen if we really try.
And so this exhibit, the Silent, as we said, it's at the Alexander Brest Gallery on the JU campus, and it's open until September 30th. The exhibit's up until the end of the next month. But you are hosting an opening reception tomorrow from 5 to 7 on Thursday. What do you plan to speak to the audience about? What kind of interaction do you think you'll have with people who are looking at your artwork?
I think that they allow me 8 to 10 minutes, which is very challenging for me, because I have so much to talk about, so much that I think about, so much that I paint about, so much that I want to discover and challenges. But the general thoughts and concepts in my paintings and the audiovisual installations and short films are how humanity treats one another, the metaphysical properties of humanity, why we are here, where we're going, what is this all about, just the philosophical construct, and where I can take it, as we were speaking earlier, into my Yantian world that is a more poetic prose approach, that there can be a balance and peace. Also, there's not much that I don't touch on.
Yeah. It is a really vast exploration of subjects and incredibly engaging work, beautiful to look at. Paul Yunt, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And could I say one last word, please?
Yes, very
Thank
briefly.
you. And I invite all of Jacksonville and Anne Schindler and Stacy Bennett and the Comer.
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Up next, our resident spaceman catches us up what we should check out in the night sky.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Even when we drive defensively, accidents can still happen. Do you know what to do next? There's more to it than you might think.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com. Heritage Publishing produces the annual Healthcare Guide and the Duval County Medical Society Membership Directory. Both reach healthcare providers in Jacksonville and Northeast Florida, providing opportunities for local businesses to reach these professionals. Info at heritagepublishinginc.com.
It's one hot night, and the Prince of Spanish Guitar, Benesse, celebrates the fire, the passion, the spirit of Spain. One of the longest-running world music and dance productions touring the world. A mesmerizing and magical night. Celebrating the rise of Spanish guitar. Benesse, September 25th at WJCT Studios. Go to wjct.org/events for tickets.
Music, books, film. Artificial intelligence is changing how we express ourselves and create. But what are the consequences?
A debut novelist has lost a $2 million book contract because nobody could prove that he wrote it without AI.
I'm Amory Sievertson. Is AI a tool for creativity, a crutch, or a barrier? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. We're joined by our resident spaceman, Eddie Whistler. He's the director of planetarium and outreach at the Museum of Science and History. He's here to talk about all things space, from some mind-boggling telescope shots to the August blood moon. Eddie.
We love these subjects.
We do.
Come on.
We
so
love
much
when you're
fun.
here.
It's always my
highlight
pleasure.
of my month. So I want to start with this telescope I mentioned, the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope. This is not like the Nancy Grace of legal commentary, TV celebrity fame.
This was the first female chief of astronomy for NASA in the late 1950s, early 60s.
So a legend in her field. This is launching Sunday, this telescope.
She's known as the mother of Hubble.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, which is fitting because the Nancy Grace Roman telescope is like the natural next Hubble 2.0.
Hubble
the
being
next
this
gen.
amazing
Yeah,
telescope
yeah.
that told us all kinds of new things about the universe.
Yes, and now, we can get there.
Yeah. So this is launching. I mean, you were saying before we got started, when it actually sort of, is in space and perhaps transmitting content is not going to start immediately.
No, because it needs to travel to the same place in space that the James Webb Space Telescope is, and the Gaia Observatory is, and many other space observatories are out at a spot in space that so far away that it can just 24 hours a day function as a telescope.
And preparation for getting this telescope where it's going to go, this incredible photograph that was taken of the Milky Way, which if people are watching our live stream, they can look at. It's just
let me see.
Dazzling.
Look at that image. For those who can't see, it looks like somebody took gold sparkles and just dumped massive numbers of them onto like black velvet.
It's worth Googling.
It's worth Googling.
Yeah. And so why are we getting images like this? What role does it play for setting up this next telescope's mission?
Yes. So Euclid is a telescope that is currently functioning and looked to the galactic core, which is just massively packed with stars. It had done that in order to set a baseline so that when Nancy Grace Roman looks later on after the science mission starts and gets going, can look into the same area and already have like a toe in the water. So the Euclid mission set a baseline. Now Nancy Grace Roman is going to be looking and interrogating the light of 100 million stars, and because of reasons, we'll find thousands of planets orbiting around those stars. That's why we want this packed area, because you maximize the number of stars that you're able to analyze. And we should find, they're thinking something, between 2,000 and 6,000 planets.
Wow.
As a part of that survey.
Those of us who are interested in the night sky, I mean, that's not an image that we can see with our naked eye. It's something we have to see online. But there is going to be in our night sky something visible this week. Tomorrow night? Thursday night?
Thursday night, early Friday morning. 12:12 is when the moon is going to be at its peak coverage for this eclipse. It's over 90% of it will be covered.
A lunar eclipse.
A lunar eclipse, exactly. So at night, we're looking up at the full moon. It starts early 10 o'clock, maybe like 10:15 or something, and the Earth's shadow, well, the moon will move into the Earth's shadow at about 10 and then peak at 12:12. So you got to be up late, but it's worth it because you get to see the moon in that deep red color.
Yeah, that's why they call it the blood moon.
Always. It's always this reddish color whenever it's a lunar eclipse. You would think the moon passes into the Earth's shadow, so it should just disappear because it's going to be this black object that's being shadowed, but that's not how it works. The sun's light hits the atmosphere of the Earth and is kind of refracted and bent in towards the moon, and only the red light of the sun. The blue light is scattered out by the atmosphere, so only red light is left. So you have bent red light landing on the surface of the moon. Blood moon.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Don't you love it?
Yeah.
I mean, was it my voice or the content?
I think it's the whole package, Eddie.
Oh, that's
it's kind of what you bring to the table. Yeah. I wanted to just quick ask, because you were talking about the exoplanets, these people who don't know what that is. I think it's maybe just worth a little quickie lesson.
Yeah. Our sun is a star. It has 8 planets around it, and then other amazing objects like the Pluto objects. Now, of course, we look out and we see other stars out there. They should have other planets, and indeed we know currently of over 6,000 confirmed documented planets because of other surveys and other telescopes that were dedicated to that. And now we're going to learn about thousands more through the Nancy Grace Roman. Now, it is not a planet hunting telescope. That is one of the missions that it has under its belt that it will do, but it is one of them.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the lesson. Thanks for the forecast. There's a lot to be watching the night skies for. Eddie Whistler, Outreach Planetarium director, and always bringing us great lessons about space.
Yeah, and bringing it out to schools and retirement communities. I mean,
You're on the move all the time.
Yeah, come on the move.
All right. Eddie Whistler, thank you so much for being here.
You got it.
All right. And thank you for listening. Thanks to everybody who called and emailed today. And join us tomorrow. We're going to be talking about one of the original coral reefers, member of the iconic Jimmy Buffett Band. He is actually a restaurateur here in St. Augustine. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
WJCT and ViStar Credit Union present Caregiving, caring for your future.